Hey everyone, this is Elenbaas from Nightlight Astrology. Today we're going to take a look at Venus entering the sign of Scorpio. Venus is entering the sign of Scorpio later today into tomorrow, and then immediately makes a square to Pluto. So the rest of our week, content-wise, is going to be dedicated to looking at Venus and Scorpio, Venus square Pluto, some horoscopes. Today I want to take a look in particular at how Venus acts and behaves when she's in Scorpio, which is a sign where she's traditionally said to be in her detriment or her exile. But this is one of the most creative, sexual, erotic, interesting placements for Venus. And I want to explore why that is the case today. And hopefully that will give you some fun things to think about. Kind of a new way of thinking about Venus and Scorpio is really the hope behind this episode. So anyway, that's what we'll do for today. Before we get into it, remember to like and subscribe, share your comments and reflections, click on the notification bell for updates. If you're not yet subscribed, it takes 2 seconds to click the subscribe button. It helps us immensely. So thank you in advance for doing that. You can find transcripts of any of these daily talks on the website, which is nightlightastrology.com. We're going to take you over there right now to promote our upcoming program. If you go to the courses page, click on first year course, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. Our first year course in Hellenistic astrology begins again November 15th. So you are just at about the starting point of a new program. It is not too late to enroll. So you go to the bottom of the page to do that. And I want to make sure you are aware of the need-based tuition option. At the bottom of the page, you'll find a need-based tuition option that allows you to apply for tuition within a sliding scale that you can determine for yourself. We want people to take advantage of that who otherwise wouldn't be able to take the program, but you have a real sincere desire to study astrology, or you are approaching this from the standpoint of looking for some healing and personal transformation and growth. That's one of the main reasons people come to our programs, as well as perhaps having an intention to practice professionally. All of that is what we set you up for at Nightlight. Come join us, study with us. It's going to be a great program. At the end of today's video, there's an informational talk that tells you everything you need to know about the program. So stick around for that at the end of today's content if you want to learn more. Every day I've been saying something about what I think makes our program special. Today I'm going to talk briefly about gently provoking growth. All of our courses are designed to get you to think about astrology in ways that typically people who have perhaps only learned astrology through a modern lens have not yet had the opportunity to think about. So in our programs, we want to be provocative, but in a way that's nurturing, safe, that allows you to choose your own adventure, become the astrologer that you are meant to be personally, but also provide you with opportunities to become who you're meant to be as a spiritual being, as an astrologer, by gently provoking opportunities to think very differently than the way that we're typically taught to think about things in astrology. That's an intentional part of all of our programs. So on that note, I hope you'll come check it out. Now, let's shift our attention over to the real-time clock where we're going to take a look at Venus. So what you'll see here today, Wednesday, November 5th, is that we have Venus on the edge of Libra, at the very final degrees of Libra. And she moves very quickly. And so we are going to see, oops, you know what? Let me just shift this. Sorry, I've got a little bit of an issue with my software program. It's not allowing me to move the clock. So give me just a second. Let me set this back up. Let's see if it works now. All right. So I'm going to advance this and get it up to, okay. So you can see that today, Wednesday, November 5th, we have Venus at the very final space of Libra, and my Epic pen is just not working. So I apologize, guys. We're going to see that tomorrow, Thursday, November 6th, Venus is going to very gradually enter the sign of Scorpio. Now, she's going to enter Scorpio around 5 p.m. Central Time, Thursday, November 6th. That's my time zone. But adjust accordingly if you're on the West Coast, the East Coast, another time zone. Venus enters Scorpio tomorrow, so we're sort of prepping for that today by this opening meditation. And then if we advance this to Friday, we're going to see that on Friday, at the first degree of Scorpio, Venus moves into a square with Pluto, who's at the first degree of Aquarius. And so as soon as Venus enters Scorpio, boom, we've got a square to Pluto in Aquarius. If we give that square about 3 degrees of separation, that takes us through the weekend. So put it this way, from tomorrow, which is today's Wednesday, November 5th. So we go tomorrow, the 6th, all the way through, let's say, the 9th, as a time frame within which you may notice Venus changing signs, changing dignities, hitting a square to Pluto all at once. And that's why we're going to spend the next couple of days looking at this, including some horoscopes eventually, an examination of Venus square Pluto. Today, I just want to spend some time with Venus's dignity change in the sign of Scorpio. Venus was traditionally said to be in her exile or detriment in this sign, but we need to ask ourselves the question, why? What is an exile or a detriment, and why do these categories exist at all? This gets into ancient planetary philosophy, and the language of dignities comes from planetary philosophy. In the scheme of the ancient astrological zodiac, with the planets all ruling 2 signs, one feminine, one masculine, except for the sun and the moon, which only rule 1 sign each, we have effectively a Venus placement and a Mars placement, for example, that will be masculine and feminine. Venus's masculine sign is Libra, its feminine sign is Taurus. Mars's masculine sign is Aries, its feminine sign is Scorpio. If you take Mars or Venus, which are philosophical opposites in ancient astrology, and place them in either of each other's signs, you get what's called an exile or detriment. And this is the case for any planetary ruler. If you take the planetary ruler of any sign and put it into its opposite, the nature of that opposite planet in the opposite sign represents a kind of philosophical duality between what the planets represent. And therefore, you're putting a planet in an environment that is sort of contrary to its own nature, and that creates a kind of archetypal tension. Now, that tension is really not good or bad in any absolute sense, as much as it is a tension that we humans tend to experience as difficult because of how we experience all polarities. The more intense a polaric opposition becomes, the more that our containers have to hold that tension, and that creates stress. Now, that stress could be creative stress, which is awesome. That's ideal, right? When you're holding a tension and it yields something creative, you learn something, you make something, and it feels like that tension was therefore meaningful. As opposed to, for example, when that tension is so great and you can't hold it and it breaks something, it destroys something. It's like being in the gym, the tension's too great, you might strain a muscle. And then it doesn't feel meaningful, it feels destructive. And we throw our hands up and go, what's wrong with reality, you know? But the tension between planetary opposites is part of how the language of dignities works. So when it comes to Venus being in the sign of the Scorpion, what we're really saying is that we're taking Venus and we're putting her in a feminine sign, sort of nocturnal, watery yin sign, that's a little bit better for Venus. For example, I would say that Venus in Scorpio sometimes can deal with that element of the sign in a little bit easier manner than, say, Venus in Aries. Different conversation, and maybe all of that is just speculative. But regardless, this is a sign of Mars. And so when you take Venus and put her in a Mars-ruled sign, suddenly Venus has to be herself, act and behave like herself. What does that mean? It means that she is the natural reality principle of love, beauty, grace, harmony, agreement, that opposites should get along and cohere. If you think of the word cosmos and the word cosmetic, they share the same root, like a well-arranged whole, where things flow and find proportion and symmetry, and it's pleasant and enjoyable. Good music, good food, good sex, all have to do with complementary things working together cohesively in a way that's enjoyable or pleasant or desirable, etc. So Venus, broadly speaking, represents that facet of reality that allows for flow and agreement and harmony between the various aspects of reality. Reality is one thing and it's many things at the exact same time. So the ability that the many things have to experience their simultaneous oneness and difference is a Venus kind of thing, because it allows for flow, which creates connectivity, and the feeling of unity or oneness starts to permeate. When you're really connected with a lover, although you're different, you feel as though you are one. And so that felt sense of oneness that exists between separate beings, paradoxically, is facilitated by Venus. especially when it feels good and when it feels somewhat satisfying. That's Venus. Now put her in a Mars ruled sign, and we have her now having to act and behave that way because that's natural to her. But she's doing so in an environment that's about things like cutting and severing rather than bringing things together. Mars cuts things apart. Rather than harmony, Mars is individuality. Rather than peace, Mars is war. Rather than, let's say, the natural way in which we attract and find agreement because of fluid, sort of subtle, harmonious ways of being, Mars gets what it wants through aggression and competition and conflict and dominance and assertiveness and aggression. So they're polar opposites. They both have a place in reality, just as surely as we need to cut the umbilical cord when we're born. It's a simple Mars example. Timeless, works. So place Venus in Scorpio, and now we have all of these tensions. But understanding those tensions and being a little bit creative with the way in which we experience them leads to this particular Venus placement, Venus in Scorpio, yielding some of the subtlest, sexiest, most erotic significations of any Venus placement, in my humble opinion. I will honestly say that I think that it's because this is also a deep autumnal yin watery sign of Mars. This is a feminine sign of Mars that we get almost like layers of Venusian complexity that yield a more like tasty dish. Let's just put it this way, and maybe I'm not seeing things clearly here, but I would just say Venus in Aries, for example, another sign of Venus's detriment, where Venus is in another Mars ruled sign. You don't get nearly the subtlety and complexity that you do with Venus in Scorpio, and I think that's probably because, again, this is a watery yin feminine home of Mars, and so something about that femininity allows for Venus to just be a little bit more comfortable, and therefore you get these very layered, nuanced, rich levels of meaning that represent that tension between Venus and Mars in a slightly better way. Anyway, that's just maybe my subjective opinion as an astrologer. We all have opinions about these kinds of things for sure. All right. Well, anyway, I have 5 sexiest Venus and Scorpio secrets. I thought that was kind of a fun way of phrasing it. Now, remember, any of these you could push back on. Any of these could have a shadow. And I understand that talking about some of these things for some people, especially people who have been in terrible relationships or abusive relationships, or like any of these things on this list could be seen as like toxic, which is specifically why they're on the list, because most medicines in the world have a very close relationship with poisons. This is something my wife could tell you about as an herbalist. And I can tell you about having worked in the Amazon for a long time with ayahuasca and seeing how curanderos are both familiar with the most medicinal things and the combinations of things that can be the most toxic or that can potentially like peel you out, like add a little bit too much of this to an ayahuasca mix and you're screwed. So anyway, the idea here to me is that some of what's on this list could be seen as somewhat poisonous or somewhat toxic. But I think that's also the key to why some of these things are so beautiful and rich and sort of sexy and erotic. And the soul craves that level of complexity, again, which is why I thought there's some value in a list like this. But remember, you know what? As we go, I'll try to mention some of the shadows, just so that, because I know sometimes you listen to this and you're like, this is triggering, so anyway, let's get into it. Here's a Venus in Scorpio secret that has to do with the Venus-Mars pairing and tension that's present with Venus in Scorpio. And it's true. And like, look, you don't have to have Venus in Scorpio to feel this while Venus is in Scorpio. It's people who with Venus in Scorpio may know about this better than others, but any kind of Pluto to Venus transit or any major Scorpio transit that activates some other part of your chart, sometimes these things will come up in general. But here's the truth. With Venus and Scorpio, we actually need and love and want complicated. That like the relationship status that they used to have on Facebook. I don't know if they still have it or not. It's like, we're in a relationship, or I'm dating, or it's complicated. And I always thought it was funny that they came up with a designation, it's complicated. I think we like complicated. Now, I'm not saying every phase of your life and every moment of your life you like complicated. Maybe there's a phase and there's a season for all things, right? And there's the shadow. Because there's a very real way in which you can be like, yeah, you know what? Complicated is toxic. No more complicated for me. I went through the complicated phase. Okay, fine. But can we acknowledge that there is an archetypal reason that many of us go through a period of time in life or come back to this experience of things being messy, and where there's just like a tinge of pain or a lack of certainty or clarity, or am I going to be betrayed, or can I trust this, or am I trustworthy? And we have to, there's something about walking on that razor's edge where things are not completely stable, they're not completely clear, there's not complete certainty or confidence in the dynamic that makes it so tasty. Even when you're married, I will say that like microcosm, you're married for whatever, let's say 30 years. Uh, in those 30 years, there's going to be periods of time where, let's say, you make love, and you make love from a space of comfort and safety, and like it's regular in the sense that there's nothing like uncertain about it. Ha ha ha. But there are also phases that all relationships go through, as far as I can tell, talking to lots of people, reflecting on my own marriage and stuff like that, where, like, let's say you're fighting about something over the course of a couple of days. But within that space where you're like, I'm not sure how I feel about you, and you're not sure how you feel about me, and I think I'm the more mature one, and I think you have problems, you have shadows, and the other person's like, no, you have shadows. Make love within that space. It's complicated, but there's like also no other space within which to taste that particular kind of tension that's actually very pleasurable. And another example of this would be makeup sex. There's nothing like makeup sex. Everyone knows that. Or the sex that comes on when you're at the beginning of getting to know someone, call it like the honeymoon period. But a lot of that is built on uncertainty. There's so much tension because it's new, and is it safe? And I'm surrendering to it. I'm opening myself to something, and I'm doing so maybe too quickly, but that's part of what makes it so amazing. You can take that word complicated in a lot of different directions. And I'm certainly not saying that there isn't a benefit to safety or trust or all of the less complicated things, right? As a Taurus rising, believe me, I'm not someone who likes to revel in complicatedness all the time. But can't we be real about this? Like, isn't it interesting when something complicated comes into your life and you go, what if I just messed the whole thing up? what like, you're in a stable place, you've developed good, sensible boundaries and taste, you're dating, you're not married, someone comes into your life, they just got out of a relationship, they're a mess, very well this is not going anywhere good, but maybe. So there it is. We like complicated. Venus in Scorpio is like the goddess coming in, waving a flag, saying, don't tell me you don't like complicated. You like a little bit of it. And I'm here to bring something creative into your life because you allow for the right appropriate degree of complicatedness to flavor the pleasure, to flavor the connection, to flavor the art. I know. All right, 2, possession is erotic. Now, look, if you've been in, I'm going to say this right away because I talked about this with a Scorpio transit, I don't know, maybe over the summer, and someone said this, and I felt a little bad. If you've been in a relationship where someone is a stalker, or they're like, the possessiveness is over the top, it's abusive, it's like, that's not what I'm referring to here, right? When I say possession is erotic, I'm talking a little bit more like, if you ever saw the movie 50 Shades of Grey, I didn't read the book, but I did see the movie. There is a way in which to feel owned, consumed, possessed, for many of us, is a particular kind of pleasure or erotic. Like, think about it from the standpoint of reality itself. Take away lover dynamics and think about this in terms of the moments where you feel completely consumed by a creative passion that's flowing through you, that it feels like it's possessing you more than you're possessing it. I can give you a few examples. There have been certain times where I give a talk on YouTube and I feel like I'm on a roll. And then it becomes more than on a roll. It feels like something has possessed me. They're rare. It's, it's every 100th video or something from my standpoint anyway. But when you're in that space, I feel like the gods, the archetypes are grabbing me, which is why I use that hashtag grab for storytelling episodes. We need to do one. We haven't done one in a while. But when that force comes through and it's like something's possessing me, man, there's few things that feel as good and powerful as that. Or playing a musical instrument, not that I'm some virtuoso or anything, but like when I get into jamming, my wife's uncle and cousins around Thanksgiving, Christmas, when we get together, we all bring our guitars and we jam. And when we're like really an hour into it and music's just flowing through, I feel possessed. So I'm coming at it from that standpoint. I'm not trying to say like, yeah, get into a relationship with a creepy possessive person. But there's also like, there's something very erotic when someone says, "You're mine. I am yours." We say that, "I'm yours, you're mine," in a very usually casual. It doesn't feel like, someone's sitting on your head and like not letting you move or something. It's like, but you know what I mean, where the feeling of being desired, held, consumed, owned, possessed, like a force greater than you is just taking you over. We need to give ourselves to that, but to do that often involves power struggles within ourselves or with other people. I think this is why, honestly, that movie, that book, 50 Shades of Grey, was so wildly popular, because it touches on a very complicated human dynamic in the human psyche that exists. It's not easy to access without it becoming potentially dangerous. But that's the danger is exactly where this very rare type of beauty or passion lives. I'm going to make love with this person. I think then they're going to destroy my life. Yep, it's worth it. Anyway. All right, number 3. Unfulfilled desires, longings, cravings are fuel. Venus in Scorpio burns for things that it wants, that it desires, but often because of the Mars element of this sign, Venus will be frustrated in satisfying her wants and desires. So a very basic meaning of Venus in the sign of Scorpio is, not being able to have what you want, or there being a lot of challenges or conflicts surrounding the pursuit of pleasure. I want to have an easy, nice time, but you're being dramatic and making it difficult. That's a very Venus and Scorpio thing to experience. We may or may not want to look at our own contribution to the situation too, right? But when there's unfulfilled desires, longings, cravings, and we allow them to exist, and we like sit with them and let them grow and move and speak, they are often the starting point of a creative process. I will say that when Uranus, for example, squared my natal Venus, it was commonly a Venus dynamic. And there's a feeling of like with Uranus, it's not the same as Scorpio, but there's a feeling of needing to break free. And creatively, I had to sit for 2 years slowly writing a book that was not like in the moment of the instantaneous realization that I need to get back to my writing, my creative writing. The feeling was like, I want to write a whole book all at once. But, writing a book is a process. So that breakthrough creatively took years. And anyone who's made something creative that's substantive, that takes a long time, knows exactly what I'm talking about. Venus in Scorpio says, play the long game. You're not going to get it right away, or it's going to be a little bit more complicated, or it's going to require a process, and so can you live with that burn that becomes a creative fuel for a fire that's going to take a long, see, fixed signs, right? They take a long time. They're slow and organic and process oriented in the way that things play out. So even though Venus will spend 3 weeks in Scorpio, what's going to happen is it will activate the things that you desire, that you want to act on, but can't immediately gratify. But that is what is so darn sexy and erotic and creative about this placement. Number 4, secrets are life-giving. look, you've heard me say this before. I've been saying it for years, ever since I read James Hillman talking about this in a book that he wrote on therapy. One of the reasons that people go to therapy, he said, was specifically so that they could reveal secrets. Revealing secrets and having secrets are some of the most Venus and Scorpio things that we all love, that we all do, that we all have. Now, secrets shared with the wrong people that break the container, that betrayal can be very Venus and Scorpio. Sharing your secret with the wrong person, sharing a secret rather than just holding it. These can also be Venus and Scorpio shadows. But the power of having things that are just your own, feelings, thoughts, desires, experiences, insights, anything that's just your own. It's like your own little, remember Little Mermaid? She has like a little treasure trove filled with stuff. It's just hers. It's just her little space with all the things she's collected. But we each need a room like that in the psyche that's filled with things we gather and collect that are just ours. Let me give you an example. I think it's really universal. In like many relationships in our lives, we're committed, right? We're like, I'm in it. I'm not going anywhere. I'm not going to reach outside of this relationship. But let's say, for example, you're out grocery shopping and someone looks at you with genuine attraction. Or like you see it and you go, oh wow, that person, they think I'm attractive. They think I'm beautiful or desirable. And you're not going to go reach out. You're not going to go talk to them. But you might take that moment because of how special it made you feel. And you might put it in your little cave filled with trinkets. Do you know what I'm talking about? I don't think there's anything wrong with that. And I think we ought to celebrate the fact that we are like little gatherers of sacred psychic mementos and artifacts that we collect in human experience. And that if you're intentional about saying that was a beautiful, sacred little moment that is just for me, I'm going to put it somewhere and I'm going to keep it and I can draw on it creatively. I think there's so much beauty in that. Let me give you a simple example from my life recently that like meant the world to me. I'm going to share a secret with you. This was a secret that I have not told anyone. So recently I was at the gym and this older gentleman came up to me and just started asking me how to do an exercise. He was trying to work with the rowing machine, and he was asking me how to do it. And as he was talking, I realized, oh, he thinks I'm a trainer here on staff at the gym. And so I said, oh, I can tell you how to use that machine, but I think you might be looking for a trainer. And he was like, oh, I'm so sorry. I thought you were a trainer. And he goes, you look so fit. This made my fucking day. It just seriously made my day. I felt so special because for many years of my life, I haven't felt good about my body, or I haven't felt good about the way I've looked, or haven't thought of myself as a strong person that someone might mistake for a personal trainer. And so, but that's the kind of moment that I might tuck away and never tell anybody about, because I find that when I have a drawer full of things like that, and believe me, I do, I have a drawer filled with shit. It's not a junk drawer. It's a meaningful junk drawer. And I draw on it because the stuff I store in there is life-giving. So Venus and Scorpio, you may have private, secret, wonderful little things that, to share, it might be taboo, but to keep is somehow creative genius. Do you know what I mean? All right. Number 5, honesty is foreplay. Look, if you are honest and open about how you feel, about what you think, without hostility, resentment, without sticking barbs into the way you're talking, it is, at least in Venus and Scorpio season, it might actually be an attractive step toward a lover, a friend. So the foreplay doesn't have to, when I use the word foreplay, I don't necessarily mean that it has to lead to something sexual, but being honest in a way that's just plain and thoughtful, like emotionally intelligent honesty, authentic, deep, true, real, maybe a little provocative, maybe a little taboo, but it's just honest. Venus in Scorpio has an amazing way of weaving a tapestry of beauty, depth, connection, pleasure, sensuality that cannot be woven through anything other than gentle, honest, taboo truth. Getting in touch with that while Venus in Scorpio is powerful, life-giving, so wonderful. So anyway, these are some of the things that I believe we don't often talk about with Venus and Scorpio as these beautiful values that are there specifically because of the tension. So they don't eliminate the detriment, because any of those qualities, hiding things, when secrets are destructive, when unfulfilled desires become destructive, when possession becomes stalkers, when complicated becomes pathological, right? Of course. But can we stop to allow for some nuance? That's what I'm advocating here. Now, I told you we are doing promotions a little bit differently. I want to promote, before we leave, I'm giving a talk on Venus as the archai in ancient astrology. These were ways of understanding planetary philosophy that look at the planets as first principles of reality. So we're going to be talking in this webinar on November 13th. You go to the live talks page on my website, nightlightastrology.com. On November 13th, I'm giving a talk called Pairing the Planets, Venus's Many Faces. What this series is doing is taking a look at what the most basic philosophical understanding of the planet was in ancient astrology. By that, we mean, what did Venus tell us about the nature of reality itself? What does she represent about the big reality with a capital R? From there, how does she pair with all the other planets and their philosophical principles? When you understand that level of things, you're going to start to become a much more intuitive, artful astrologer, because you have to get down to philosophical first principles if you want to learn real astrology. So anyway, come check this out. It's from 7 to 9 p.m. on the 13th. If you can't make it live, you get the recording afterward. Remember that I think one of the best things about our programs, before I sign off here and give you the informational video about year one, we start November 15th. Our curriculum is designed to be gently provocative. This talk today was designed to be gently provocative, to provoke deep, kind of fun, radical new ways of thinking about something, but to do so in a way that feels safe, that doesn't feel self-righteous or like pedantic, or, we want people to feel safe to move about the cabin, and to have really thought-provoking things that can generate change if it's right for you. So anyway, on that note, stick around to learn more about the year one program. I'll see you all again soon. Bye. Hey everyone, thanks for sticking around. I'm excited to tell you about our upcoming program, Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. This is our first year course in Hellenistic astrology, and it begins again this November. In this video, I'm going to tell you about the course, the format of the course, and how to register. So let's go ahead and get into it. What is this course about? Well, if you are not familiar, ancient Hellenistic astrology is the earliest and original form of horoscopic astrology. All of the subsequent forms and schools of astrology that have existed over thousands of years come from these philosophical and theoretical roots. And so what you're doing when you study Hellenistic astrology is you're going back to understand the why behind absolutely everything. Why were there ever such a thing as houses and signs in the first place? How were the planets ever assigned to rule various portions of the zodiac in the first place? How do you use the categories of essential dignity, and why were they ever created in the first place? If you're someone like me, you like to know the why behind things, because once you understand the why, then you know how to use things more intuitively. So really the point of Hellenistic astrology, in my opinion, is not so much about going back and becoming a traditional astrologer, or just being traditional for the sake of being traditional, as much as it is about grasping the roots of the entire system and paradigm. When you understand those roots, you have more intuition and understanding, which allow for you to be much more artful and fluid in the way that you speak the language of astrology. We call this class Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic because while it is about going back to understand the philosophical, theoretical, technical roots of the tradition, it's also about fluidly bridging those things with modern astrology and all of its most unique contributions. For example, modern astrology has given us so much psychological depth and personal depth. And so in a modern astrological setting, you're going to get the ability to explore your own character, your own psychology, and you're going to be able to utilize astrology for a process of healing and personal transformation. But when you pair that with ancient astrology, and it's almost like predictive karmic analytics, you really have a full toolkit to work with. And so that's also a great mission of ours at Nightlight, is to bridge ancient and modern forms, which is why we call the program Ancient Astrology for the Modern Mystic. So that's just a little kind of overview of the program. If you want to know more about the specifics of the curriculum and of the syllabus, what I encourage you to do is go over to nightlightastrology.com, click on the courses page, go to the first year course, scroll down, and you'll see this over 12 months you'll learn about. And here you're going to see more of a detailed breakdown of the curriculum itself. I can promise you that if you've studied astrology in modern context, but you've never gone back to the ancient roots, while some of these topics may look familiar to you and you go, oh, I've already learned about that, unless you've studied them from the Hellenistic perspective, I guarantee that you are not going to be familiar with this content. Hellenistic astrology is mind-blowingly new and interesting for most people. And if you've never studied it, again, don't assume that anything on this list is something you're going to be familiar with. In that way, the program is really ideal for a variety of different people, and I'll say more about that in a second. So what is the format of the course? Let's go to that next. Scroll down and you're going to see that the course includes 30 online webinars that I lead throughout the year. Over the course of a year together, I have 30 classes that are broken into different units of material. In between those classes, we have breakout study sessions with your course director and 2 TAs. They're going to lead you through Q&A sessions and tutoring sessions to make sure that you have a lot of support in between major units of study. In addition, we also have an interactive group forum discussion where you can ask questions year-round and get an answer within a business day in the student forum, where a lot of people also connect and build community. Lots of people in that forum also develop like little meetup groups outside of class. That's very common in all of our programs. It's a very community-loving, warm space where anyone's also welcome. Throughout the course, you're also going to find that for every lesson, if you're just there as a hobby student, you can just listen to the webinars. They're all recorded for you. So if you can't make the live webinars, everything is housed on the website as recordings. I'd say about 40 or 50% of our students are going to be following along at their own pace, whereas the other half might be attending the live webinars. But it's really kind of, you know, if you can attend a few and then 1 week you got to be gone, the recordings are always there. You have lifetime access to everything in the course, so it's not a big deal. For every lesson as well, if you're someone who wants to go really, really deep, maybe you have the intention to practice professionally, this course is set up with an optional certification exam at the end from our school, from our program. So you can, you know, if you want to build that resume and develop the credentials from our programs, you can do that, but you also, it's optional, so you don't have to. And outside of every lesson, we have recommended reading. We have supplemental bonus content, all of which is optional, but it's there for people who might want a lot more, whereas some people will take the webinars themselves, and that'll be plenty. So it's really flexible in that way. Also, this is one program within 4 years of curriculum that are meant to go together. And so most people who come through our first year program will end up taking our second year program, where we develop forecasting and prediction and transit tracking techniques. Our third year program, which is aimed at counseling and psychology. So psychological counseling skills is our third year program. And then the Oracle Within, which is our exploration of the philosophical, spiritual roots of the divinatory oracular tradition of astrology. So there's a lot of material there. We also have another 1 year program in horary astrology for some people who want to add that predictive tool to their toolkit. So there's just a lot of material at Nightlight that this class is actually just one part of, which can be taken standalone, or for some people, they get into it, they're going to love it. You're going to hang out with us for 3 or 4 years worth of content. This program is ideal for a number of different types of students of astrology. I'll say that for starters. So let's see here. I'll stop sharing this. So we have there's a profile of the typical students who come through our courses. One is going to be people who just want a very guided introduction to ancient astrology because you've never had it before. Maybe you're only familiar with modern, and you want that guided, structured approach to learning traditional for the first time. Also, people who are brand new to astrology in general, there's no better place to start than at the roots of the ancient foundations. So whether you're a total beginner or just a beginner to Hellenistic, this is a great place to start. If you are someone who's been around astrology for a long time, but you've never had a guided, structured approach to Hellenistic astrology, again, this is a great place to start. I promise you, Hellenistic is very different than what you're familiar with, and you're going to need a guided and structured approach at some point in time. I also think for people who are looking for a lineage, which means not just a bunch of information, but a practitioner-specific based approach where you get to see a practitioner work with clients. You get to hear how a practitioner has prioritized different techniques and why. You're going to get a structured, spiritually grounded focus at Nightlight as well, where if you're looking for someone who practices astrology, but also values grounded everyday spiritual practice, that's Nightlight. If you want a community that's been in the industry for a long time now, this is our 16th year of teaching programs and guiding students through trainings. So all of those things, if they matter to you, this is a great place to study. It's a warm community atmosphere. It's spiritually grounded. It's focused. It's academically rigorous. It's going to provide you the appropriate preparation for practicing professionally, especially if you go through all of our programs. But also for those who are just curious and love astrology for your own personal interests, this is going to be a great place for you to learn and grow and thrive and feel like you have a lot of support around you in the curriculum, the teachers, the community, as you're developing, what might just be a personal interest or spiritual hobby. So that is who it's ideal for. Finally, how you register. You go over to the website. I'm going to take you back there. And it's at the bottom of the first year page. You're going to find that the early bird rate is in effect until October 24th. You can save significantly off the cost of the course when you use the early bird rate, where you can pay in full, or use an early bird installment rate plan. Both are going to save you off significantly off the cost of the course. But also at Nightlight, it has always been our mission to make sure that astrological education is accessible for everyone. So please, if you are someone who would love to take this course, but maybe you can only afford a small amount of tuition per month, use the tuition assistance. It is there. All you got to do is apply. You fill out the little form. You tell us your situation. If you're on a fixed income, if you're on a limited income, if you're part-time, if you're in between jobs, if you don't make a lot and you're on that fixed budget, we understand. We don't want people to hurt themselves trying to study something that is spiritual that we feel should be very accessible for everybody. So if you're someone who could use a little help to make this program happen, for whatever reason, maybe you're a single parent or you're on disability or you're retired or you're on a fixed income, whatever the case is, use that tuition assistance. Also, people in other countries who have extreme, exchange rates. We get it. So just use the tuition assistance and we'll be glad to make sure that the price point is accessible. For us, as a spiritual topic, we're a business at the end of the day, but we believe that this is a spiritual topic. And so accessibility has been a part of our model for 16 years now. We've never not had one of our training programs with affordable sliding scale based prices for people who need it. So please take advantage of that. It's all there for you. I hope to see you in classes soon. And if you have any questions about the program whatsoever, direct them to us at info@nightlightastrology.com. And I hope to see you all coming up here in November. Take it easy, everyone. Bye.